Welcome back, beautiful people. This episode is going to be a little bit different. This is episode 99 of An Untold Narrative. The first episode of this podcast was released on April 22nd, 2020. For those who can put that date together, it was literally the first month of the pandemic, within the first 2 months at least. And I actually didn't know that I was going to start this podcast in a pandemic. I wanted to start the podcast to start a podcast. And it just so happened that the show originated during a time where we actually needed people to talk to. And so the podcast has really transformed over the past 99 episodes. I haven't exactly had 99 guests. There's probably a handful of episodes where I just recorded just myself, similar to this episode. And I'm doing this show just solo before episode 100, just as a point of reflection. I do have episode 100 and 101 recorded by the time this comes out. So the new season 14, which will be starting at episode 100 and beyond, is already in the works, and it's getting better and better. For those who have listened over the past 3.5 years, just riding with this show, it has been such a journey, and I'm super thankful for any consistent listener. It's really meant the world. I get DMs from those consistent people, probably a handful of people who just like week in, week out, anytime there's a new episode, they listen in. There are a core number of people who share the podcast consistently. And so honestly, just thank you to everybody doing that. I didn't think that we would get to 100. But we did. And with that, for those who have been with me since the beginning, you will remember this clip.
Man, I think it's going to be really sick. And when you get to 100, of these, dude, I'm sending you a bottle of champagne.
Yeah?
Yes.
Dude, that's motivation. I fucking love some bubbly. Let's go.
In episode 2, obviously, I had no idea that we'd get to 100 episodes. But Atticus, thank you for putting a little bit of fire underneath me to do it. For those who don't know, if you have a podcast that is over 21 episodes, you are in the top 1% of all podcasts. So many people fail. So many people give up. So many people have an excuse as to why it dies off. I've been on podcasts who only survived 7 episodes because after season 1, the 2 people running the show just come to a disagreement or, think that it should be done differently, and it falls apart. And so I know how brutal the consistency aspect is, and I'm super fucking proud that we've made it this far. We've made it to 100, and I plan on keep going and make it better and better. As I look back and as I re-listen to a few episodes here and there, I'm incredibly thankful for all the guests. We've had artists, footwear designers, art curators, videographers, people builders, like connectors, entrepreneurs, business owners, clothing manufacturers. Really just, they span the entire realm of creativity. And the purpose of this podcast has always been to highlight creators who haven't quote unquote broken through and who haven't quote unquote made it. And I want that mission to always live and be consistent even after 100. But when I'm done talking in this episode, I'm going to play a few clips which will give away our 100th episode guest because he interviewed me a little bit as to what it meant to reach 100 and what the goals were and what we want to do moving forward. And so I won't completely spoil them here, so you can listen to them asking me some questions. But I want people to know that the content's going to get better. The guests are going to get bigger. And we're going to always have the mission to highlight creators and give them a platform to share their story where others are not giving them a platform to do so. And I'm really stoked to continue to do this into triple digits. And I know it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of energy, and we're going to figure it out. I want to invest in some things like a mic, a new camera, et cetera, et cetera. I want to try to get better at broadening the audience, which I know will take some crafting and some care, but I'm excited to do it. And looping full circle, when this podcast first started in the pandemic, it was really just to have conversations with other creators. And it's really, really helped me. Like on a selfish level, this podcast has helped me. In a time where I live alone, and while I talk to people at work, and I have friends, it only goes so far. And so when you're able to schedule these calls with people from around the globe and learn about their life and, even talk off camera and just like learn about somebody at their core level, that really meant the world to me. And so this podcast hopefully not only helps you, but it consistently helps me to discover and fuel my curiosity amongst other people, my peers, creators from around the planet, and what makes people tick and how and why they're creative. Originally I thought about doing this show on some of the things that I've learned. And I've done that a lot of times. I think I did it at episode 50. I might be wrong with that. I might be right. I don't know. I've done it at like my 30th birthday, and I've recapped the 30 things I've learned. And I've done these, like, I'll call them gimmicky things of milestones. And I was originally going to do that for this episode. And I think it just comes down to two things. I think that if you are looking for an answer, and so many people reach out to me on how do I break into the footwear industry? How do I become a designer? How do I get a job? I think you're asking the wrong questions. I think instead of trying to get somebody to tell you a shortcut, stop wasting that energy asking that question and just go to work. I really think it's just working or outworking people, your peers, your colleagues, to get to the same mission that you want to get to. This world is too competitive in most fields, and the economy is so bizarre these days. And there isn't a magic genie. If I told you one thing from my collective wisdom, from all my learnings throughout this podcast, that answer might not work for you. And I think it's up to you to just experiment and try and sacrifice in order to discover what's going to fuel your purpose and what's going to get you a job or whatever that is. And while I won't spoil episode 100, because it's probably one of my favorites because it's with one of my best friends, we talk about sacrifice a lot, and it's super, super powerful. And I can't wait to share the episode with you. And I think that's what it takes. That's the second thing. It's not only work, but it's sacrifice. What are you willing to sacrifice? I've been sacrificing in order to do 100 episodes of this podcast, sacrificing my personal time, sacrificing frustrations with scheduling, Believe it or not, people change their schedules last minute. You have to organize these calls. You have to, I not pride myself on, but I haven't done my research on guests because I thought it led to a more organic conversation, and I do believe that. But moving forward, I think I'm going to start being very, very precise and particular about how I spend that time to craft and really make sure that we get the most out of these episodes. If you listened to episode 98 with David Rice of Brand Black, you should feel and hear, even I'll say going back to episode, let's call it 90, maybe 85. The frame of these conversations has been different than when we originally started. And that's because I want to get to the root. I don't want to just give you their life synopsis like I previously was on earlier episodes. That stuff's fantastic and it's great and it has a place on this planet. But I want you to be able to walk away and feel not only inspired or motivated, but also get something tangible of what you can apply. And I think the way that David spoke about, his journey through design, it really hits home on so many different aspects of how a young creative can break through. And so I know we're going well over 10 minutes of me rambling, and I hope you are still listening, but it's been an honestly unbelievable journey to get to 99 and also to let everybody hear episode 100 and beyond. Some of the guests they're gonna be spectacular, and I think people are gonna really appreciate them. So one more time, I just want to say thank you to everybody listening. Thank you to everybody who has shared, who consistently shares. I never ask people to subscribe or like the podcast if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, but it doesn't do anything negatively for you. So if you could just please do that, especially on YouTube. Subscribe, follow, I think is on Spotify. I think that's what they call it. So just follow the podcast, please. And just likes and comments are free. And so if you see something or hear something that you really enjoy and you share that. It does mean a lot and it fuels why I do this. And so, when I hear and see the messages from you folks of, the one that really stands out to me was we had Selene Rohr from Circle Sportswear on, I think episode 84. This is off the top of the head, no research done prior to recording this. I got a DM after her episode of somebody being like, I listened to the podcast and it gave me enough courage because I felt connected to her to send her a DM, and she was super lovely and we connected and had an awesome chat. And so when I get messages like that, where just listening and feeling connected to a guest, that inspires them to do something extra that they maybe wouldn't have done otherwise, that is something really, really special. And so I want more of those to happen. And if we could do that through the podcast, that would be amazing. So with that being said, work and sacrifice, and you can achieve pretty much anything, I think. And I really hope you stick with us for the long haul. Now I'm going to cut to a couple questions that our episode 100 guest has asked me, and that is how we will wrap up episode 99, but please listen to him. It's kind of an interview style where I give answers. Also, I was caught off guard because I didn't know he was going to ask me these things because we were originally just recording his episode. So enjoy that, have some fun with it, and thank you again, everybody.
But maybe that leads me to my question. What is the biggest learning that you've had over doing 100 episodes of the Untold Narrative hosted by David FIlar? What is the biggest takeaway, the biggest learning?
I think can I give two answers?
Yeah. It's your podcast. Do what the fuck you want.
The I know what the real answer is, but there was a second answer that popped in my brain as you were asking the question, and the thing that popped in was there's no one way to get anywhere. There's multiple ways to accomplish any sort of dream or aspiration. There's no one path for anybody to take. You can listen to 100 stories, and if they were all footwear designers, they would most likely all have different turns in their story to achieve the same thing. And while they haven't all been footwear focused, because I tried to diversify the guests on, everyone has unbelievable stories and different paths. And I think what's really been inspiring for me is the reason why I started the podcast was to give people an opportunity who don't have a ton of followers or who haven't quote unquote made it, and give them a platform to speak on behalf of their story. And these people who I've had on are actually just my friends through the internet. A lot of them I've met, most of them I probably hadn't met at that point. I've had some really amazing guests who we've known through Instagram or other social platforms. And then, we will meet in person along the way, like Eliza Payer, I had on the podcast before meeting her, and then I met her in Miami. Alicia Pinkney, I met just recently a month ago in Portland, Oregon, but I had her on really early on. And yeah, man, I've been really, I think I've learned that there's no right or wrong way to get somewhere. But the real answer is really just, you summarize this. It's just work really fucking hard, man. Everybody's story is around that same theme. It's like these people who come on this show and who really separate themselves from the pack have just worked a fuck ton, man. And they're like-minded. They're like me. They're like you. They've sacrificed things. They've done things differently. And I know that, thank you for the nice words on the podcast and working really hard and diligently. But I know when you do these things, they're going to stack. And I told my therapist last week, I'm like, I know I do a lot of things. I don't know what the end goal is. I just know they're going to compound to a certain degree where eventually it's going to result in something. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to do it because I know it's for the benefit of it all. And so, yeah, I just work really fucking hard.
Yeah, bro. It's evident through the podcast, that you've had that with everybody you've met. Do you know what I mean? And having seen you start the podcast to where you are now, and the things you've achieved and the career that you're at, it's incredible, bro. Like it is. It's like you only get back what you give, and it's like you are living evidence of that. You know what I mean? So thank you for that.
No,
and then second question would be, if there's anything you could change about the podcast, which you have the ability to do, maybe the next 100, or to change it all, what would you change about the podcast?
So it's a great question, and it's actually been ever changing for those who have been listening since the beginning. And there are a very small handful of people who have literally listened the entire 100 episodes, and I know who you are, so thank you for consistently doing that. It has changed, like the way that I've been able to formulate questions, and I've learned so much about when to articulate myself and my point of view versus the guest's point of view, when to ask certain questions, when to hold back and just give them a moment to breathe I've learned to see when people are thinking versus just as soon as there's dead silence, I would interject. So I've actually learned a lot about public speaking and the way to different mannerisms about how people process thoughts. And that's been really educational for me. So it's constantly changing. But the thing that I really want to put an effort towards in the next 100 or whatever it becomes is I actually want it to be even better, and I want to put more energy towards it. I have, for those who know, I do this for free in my spare time, and I don't really expect anything of it, and I do it for fun. I actually want to invest in it a little bit more. I want to get a microphone, which I haven't done. I used to think that the quality of the episodes come from the guests, not necessarily the platform. And for those who have noticed, the quality has gotten better because I switched to Riverside, which is a different recording platform. I was doing it for Zoom for so long, which was a terrible idea. And I wanted to consistently get better. And I thought to myself the other day, this was a few weeks back, actually, if I was going to be a professional podcast host, what would I change about the show in order to achieve something like that? And I started like making a list, and it's like actually a really exciting thought process. Because, and we should ask ourselves that about anything in our life. Like, if we were going to do this professionally, what would you change? And even if you changed one thing, it would probably get a lot better because you're trying to get to professionalism. And this hasn't been that. It's been good, but it hasn't been great. And I want to do little things to try to make it better.